Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is John J Gaming on the mic here, coming at you with a brand new episode of the FCS Dynasty here on NCAA 06, featuring that next mod as well. And we finish up yet another year of FCS football. We are now here at the year 5 offseason, and when we start year number 5, we start with the opportunity for over 110 teams to compete for a national championship. But now that champion has been crowned, and congratulations to the Western Carolina Catamounts on winning their first FCS national championship here in this series. And with that being said, we have a great episode for you guys here today because we got the off-season recap for you guys. And what we're going to do specifically in this off-season recap, not only will we follow the journey of guys such as Western Carolina and Sacramento State, their path to the national championship, but also we're going to check out the award winners. We're going to check out these recruiting rankings, see which guys specifically from the FCS ranks do make it on to the NFL, and most importantly, at least for some of you guys, we're going to go ahead and see how you guys can get a little bit more involved in this series here in the FCS Dynasty. And I'm just really excited about this episode. I'm always pumped about the off-season recaps, and I hope you guys are particularly excited as well. So if you guys are ready for all of that and much more, make sure you go ahead, smack that like button for me, hit that subscribe button for me as well if you do happen to be brand new to the channel. And let's go ahead and dive right into it, starting with the path that Western Carolina and Sacramento State took to get to the national championship. So we'll start with Sacramento State as we start from the very beginning. This was a non-conference slate that actually was a little bit more challenging than anticipated. While they did have Richmond and they were a solid football team, they played against two teams that made it to the playoffs. Sam Houston State, who they did lose to at home, and then UNLV, who they beat convincingly, and they were a team that also made it to the first round playoffs. Not only that, they did also go ahead and play against a Pac-12 squad as well in the Washington Huskies. They beat them by 11. Then after that, they got really things rolling here in conference play, taking out Portland State, beating Montana on the road, beating Montana State, who was actually ranked at the time. They are 56 and they won 56-10 there. They also, however, they did lose their regular season game against North Dakota State, put their Pac-10 championship hopes a little bit dicey, but they did get their revenge in the playoffs, which I'll talk about right about now actually. So Sacramento State was a team that did automatically move on to the second round because they did have a top 8 bye, right? So they started their playoff appearance against Nicholls State. They beat the Colonels 52-10. That put them into the quarterfinals. Now in the quarterfinals, they would have arguably their toughest challenge that they would have. They would have New Hampshire, who really gave them everything that they got, really went down to the wire. But Sacramento State did find a way to pull that out and did win in the fourth quarter specifically. This was probably one of the best games that we saw in the entire playoffs. Then in the semifinals, we have a rematch of Sacramento State and North Dakota State. And this time it did bounce in the Hornets' direction, winning 28-26, although the Bison did almost come back from a 28-3 lead. Yes, that did actually happen. They did almost have a Hornets moment. But then we check in on the team that actually did win the national championship this year, the Western Carolina Catamounts, who ended up lifting that crystal ball. Nothing too crazy in non-conference play. They did take on Villanova and Rice. Then they picked things up in conference play. Very difficult conference to navigate. They took on Arkansas Pine Bluff, who was ranked, Chattanooga, who was ranked in the top 25 as well, and they also took on, of course, Texas Southern and San Diego State as well. So they were tested quite a bit in the regular season. They ended up going 2 for 2 in their top 25 matchups, but they handled their business in all of their other games, and while they were not able to win a conference championship, they prepared themselves for the run that they had to make in the FCS playoffs. Now, in the FCS playoffs, Western Carolina actually did have to start out in the first round. They were the number 9 overall seed in this tournament. In Western Carolina, they almost were bounced in the first round. Rice actually gave them a really competitive game, but Western Carolina, they find a way to win, and they did that little bit of surviving and advancing. But then we really see them find their stride there in the second round. They took on Sam Houston State, who was the number 8 overall seed, and they handled business extremely well. The Catamounts winning 30-7, which took them in to the quarterfinals of the FCS playoffs, where after that they would actually play the number 1 seeded team in the tournament, the Akron Zips. They were the only undefeated team in the entire regular season, and Akron, they came off of a 31-28 win against James Madison, but the Catamounts, they were not phased. They beat Akron also relatively convincingly. 28-10 ended up being your final score there, and that put the Catamounts into the semifinals. Now, in the semifinals, they did have a little bit of luck, as Delaware, they were making their Cinderella run. They made it all the way to the semifinals as a 21 seed. So I think it was a little bit disrespectful that Delaware will finish number 16 in the final poll, but Western Carolina, they win 25-13, though they did end the magical run that Delaware was having in that moment. So that set up our national championship game, where, as you guys know, was between Western Carolina and Sacramento State. The Catamounts did come out on top 27-17 in order to win their first national championship in their first FCS playoff appearance, mind you. But now we'll go ahead and check in on the guys that ended up bringing home some hardware as well as win All-American honors. And we'll start with the Heisman Trophy. I know this was revealed in the conference championship episode with Brent Cunningham winning it all, but I wanted to see the order in which guys did end up finishing. So Cunningham obviously in first place, representing New Mexico State as a wide receiver, but he was not the only wide receiver on this list. Marty Subar, who was part of that number 1 team in the country, he finished second in the Heisman Trophy race. The senior wide receiver from Akron did end up having 1,800 yards and 18 touchdowns on the season. Meanwhile, Roderick Murray, also a senior running back, he had a great season, man. He finished with 2,000 all-purpose yards on the year, 23 total touchdowns. I actually thought that he should have won the Heisman Trophy, but they did not show love to the running backs like they usually do. And then rounding out the group is Dustin Arnold, the junior quarterback from Utah State, and the quarterback that they ended up losing to in the playoffs, junior redshirt Stephen Terry, who finishes the season with almost 5,000 yards passing, as well as 38 touchdowns to his name as well. As for the other award winners, we do see Dustin Arnold take home that Maxwell Award. He did finish 4th place as well in that Heisman Trophy race. Other guys in there is Roderick Murray and the junior quarterback Stephen Robinson, the junior from New Mexico State, also having a good year. He had 39 total touchdowns on the season. As for the Bednarik Award, though, that's going to go to the best defensive player in the country, and they're going to give it to Marshawn Palmer this year. The junior custom from Eastern Kentucky. He had an amazing season this year. 61 tackles, 20 sacks. He also had an interception and a couple of forced fumbles as well. Look for his name to possibly be called in the NFL draft if he does decide to declare. Running up, though, is Dan Webb, who does win the Best Linebacker Award as well. He finished with 81 tackles, 3 interceptions, and double-digit sacks as well. And rounding out the finalist list for the Bednarik Award is the senior custom in Jacob Brightman. Jacob Brightman ended up with 58 tackles, 4 sacks, 6 interceptions. Also had a couple of defensive touchdowns to his name as well. Someone to also possibly look out for in terms of NFL buzz. As for the best quarterback in the country, no surprise, going to Dustin Arnold, who did end up winning the Maxwell Award. Robinson of New Mexico State is also on this finalist list, but finishing in second place, though, is Brent Tetzel. While he did not lead his team to the FCS playoffs this year, Denzel had a great season in the MAC. He ended up with 3,000 yards passing and 32 total touchdowns as well. Actually had positive rushing yards, which is actually pretty rare to see here in NCAA 06. The idea of the mobile quarterback at the college level completely isn't as normalized as we do see with mobile quarterbacks today. As for the Walker Award, that's going to go to the best running back, and they're going to give it to Rick Miniacci. He's a junior redshirt from North Texas, and I'm actually a little bit surprised. Thought there was someone else that deserved that award, mainly Roderick Murray, who finished in second place, even though he ended up with more rushing yards, and he also had just as many receiving yards just about. Definitely had more touchdowns as well. So I'm really surprised by this award designation, but that's what they did decide to roll with. At third place, though, is Louis Rose. He's the junior running back from Eastern Kentucky. It'll be interesting to see if he does end up declaring for the NFL draft as well. He had 1,500 yards on the ground and finished with 23 total touchdowns as well. As for the best wide receiver, that will go to the Heisman Trophy winner, Brent Cunningham. But the two guys behind him are a little bit surprising. Andrew Hamilton comes up on this list. He's a junior wide receiver from Youngstown State. And while the Penguins weren't great on the football field this season, this is a guy that had a very bright season for the Penguins. He ended up with 1,300 yards receiving and could find himself some NFL buzz as well, possibly, due to 6'8", 195 pounds. Got to bulk up a little bit, but man, that is somebody to be extremely excited about. Also on this finalist for the best wide receiver is another New Mexico State wide receiver, Chaz Hooper, the senior, finished with almost 1,000 yards, but knows how to find the end zone. He had 15 touchdowns on the year. As for the best tight end in the country, that's going to go to Carl Williams, the senior tight end from Utah State. He had 720 yards and 9 touchdowns on this season, really showing some love for those tight ends out there. Also finishing runner-up is Travis Taylor, who we did end up seeing in the national championship game. The 6'3" tight end from Sacramento State had 564 yards and 8 touchdowns on the year. He'll end up finishing in second place. And a little bit of a surprise at number 3, John White. John White is a big favorite of Carnzel Ragdale, one of your guys' custom, by the way. You can easily see why. 6'8", 254 pounds. Dude is an absolute weapon. He ended up with 44 catches, 845 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Does remind me quite a bit of Travis Kelce. As for the best O-lineman in the country, that's going to go to a national champion now, and Adrian Barron in his senior year. The 6'4" product from Western Carolina ends up with 83 pancakes to just 8 sacks allowed, which it may sound a little bit high, but remember, he did play in 16 games, and also Michael Young and JC Dallas, they both like to scramble to the right quite often. Finishing as runner-up is John Franz, the sophomore from Texas Southern. He finishes with 64 pancakes and 4 sacks allowed, but just a sophomore, so he has at least a couple more years of eligibility left for the Texas Southern Tigers. And also on here as well is the junior from Eastern Kentucky, Ricky Bishop, the junior from EKU, had 58 pancakes and 3 sacks allowed, which was good for third place for this best offensive line award. As for the Remington Award going to a Georgia Southern offensive lineman by the name of Rick Nixon. While Georgia Southern did not make the playoffs for the very first time in this series, still didn't change the fact that Nixon had a good season, not allowing a single sack and also getting 32 pancakes as well. Also in consideration is the senior David Alvarez, the senior from Rice, ended up with 1 more pancake than Rick Nixon, but did not get the nod. And in third place is the senior Marcus Smith from Florida A&M. The senior finished with 28 pancakes, but did allow a few sacks, which is why he's here at third place. As for the Lombardi Award, that also goes to Marshawn Palmer, who also won the Bednarik, but a couple of San Diego State guys follow behind him. Nathan Hunt, the junior redshirt who plays defensive tackle, as the Aztec did finish with double-digit sacks as well as a few forced fumbles as well. And we also see a fellow defensive lineman by the name of Alex Washington, who finished the year with 8 sacks, but forced 4 fumbles as well. He's got a couple of years of eligibility too, which is truly the scary part. As for the best linebacker, I talked about this earlier, but Dan Webb is in here as a senior outside linebacker. Really proved himself on a Norfolk State team that certainly was not the best. Jacob Brightman also finds himself there, the senior from Arkansas Pine Bluff, but sitting in the middle of that Oreo is Andre Murphy, the senior from Sam Houston State. He played right outside linebacker this year for the Cardiac Cats and finished the year with a little bit of a Swiss Army knife stat line. He had 8 sacks, few interceptions, a few forced fumbles, but he got himself a defensive touchdown to go with all of that. As for the Jim Forte Award, that goes to the best corner in college football, the best defensive back, and it's going to go to Nate Freeman, the sophomore from Chattanooga. The Mocs corner ends the year with 8 interceptions, but also getting a couple of defensive touchdowns as well. Surprised that Pistol McNeil is not in here. I was a little bit surprised to see that, considering he did have double-digit interceptions, but we'll see if he finds himself somewhere else on this list. Also on this list is Mark Motley. He's a senior from Western Kentucky, also having a good season in his own right, not only getting 7 interceptions, but also getting a few sacks as well, playing that versatility role for the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers. And in third is the junior in Keith Washington, who finished the year with 42 tackles, few TFLs, and 4 interceptions too to go with that. A very solid year for Keith Washington. As for the Grozo Award, this goes to the best kicker in all of college football, and that will be awarded to Ricky Williams. Williams was perfect on the year with 18 for 18 on field goal attempts, had a long of 47 yards too, and matter of fact, the only kick that he really missed was an extra point, which is really surprising to see. Guys that were also in the running was Brian Kaysen. He's the senior kicker for the Murray State Racers, a team that just made their first FCS playoff appearance here in year number 5. However, he did miss a few field goals this season. Even though he was perfect on his extra points, dude did kick a 55-yard field goal. However, we do have a freshman custom in here, Paulo Pilo. He finished the year with 22 for 24 and was 53 for 56 on extra points. A very good season. Not bad for a true freshman to find himself on this list. Of course, we have the best punter in college football. I believe this is the Ray Guy Award. You can let me know if I'm wrong in the comments section, but that's going to go to Preston Hall. He's a sophomore from San Diego State, followed by Corey Week, who's a junior at Texas State, and Nate Robinson rounding out the group. Finished as a junior in Eastern Michigan. Not only did he handle punts, but he also was the backup kicker for the Eastern Michigan Eagles, was perfect on all of those kicking relating duties. And starting to round out the awards, we have the best return man in all of college football. That's going to go to the senior wide receiver, Cody Jordan. He's a senior from Portland State, and while the Portland State Vikings probably will get an award in their own right for the wrong reasons, as the most disappointing team in FCS football this season. Remember, this was a Portland State squad that finished in the top 25. This was somebody that made a difference. Cody Jordan, while not making the biggest impact in the receiving game, he only had a few receiving touchdowns on the year. If we scroll over to his return stats, he had 3 kick returns for a touchdown, and then also had a punt return touchdown to go with that too. But following high on his heels, though, is the senior custom, Quay Davis. Quay Davis ended up finishing with 2,000 all-purpose yards and 10 total touchdowns, as well as Florida A&M was actually very close to making their first FCS playoff appearance. Certainly a program that is possibly on the rise. And then another custom finished in third place. It's the junior wide receiver from Texas Southern, Solomon West, who finished the year with 1,800 all-purpose yards and 11 touchdowns. And for the final award that we have, it's going to go to the head coach of the Akron Zips. He ends up winning Coach of the Year, as his team was the only team in the regular season on the way to another one berth. Remember, these awards were decided before the end of the conference championships. So even though Akron had an early exit, they were knocked out in the first round. Well, not in the first round, but in the quarterfinals. Still a very good year for that Akron football team. Other custom players that I wanted to take the chance to highlight before I move on to the All-Americans. So we have Osiah Jackson Jr. from Youngstown State. He finished 11th in the Maxwell Award race. Also in the best quarterback race again is Osiah Jackson Jr., finishing a little higher up in this particular category. For the Walker Award, we see Bo Arias at least making it to the semifinals. He finished 12th and representing well for the Northwestern State Demons in spite of not making the playoffs this year. For best wide receiver, we had quite a few of your guys' customs on this awards list. Jacob Hill being one of them. He had 1,400 yards receiving in his junior season on the way to really a career year. And a couple of seniors also making a name for themselves as well. Jonathan Henderson, the senior from James Madison, as well as Trey Williams, who's also a senior playing at Alabama State right now. At tight end, we have Aiden Rose from Northwestern State, finishing in number 12. He had 400 yards and 5 touchdowns. For the Lombardi Award, Joseph Lysiak had a very good year as he finished 11th on the Lombardi race. He is a junior from Southeast Missouri State. And moving on to special teams, we have Ash Young, who's a true freshman at New Hampshire. He finished 5th in the Grozo Award race. And rounding out your custom guys, we have Brad Ondrauzi, the junior wide receiver from James Madison. And now we'll go ahead and check in on those All-Americans. So we now move in on the first team All-American list, and a lot of names that you guys certainly recognize. Dustin Arnold, for example, here's your Maxwell Award winner, and you got a great duo in the backfield with Roderick Murray as well as Rich Miniachi, both fighting for that Walker Award. Still surprised that Miniachi got that, but he is a first team All-American. Also in here as well is Brent Cunningham, the senior wide receiver, who did end up winning the Heisman Trophy. Marty Subar finishing 2nd for that highest award in college football. But we do have Quentin Snyder get in there as well. He's a senior wide receiver from Sanford, and while he is a little bit undersized, he made the most of his opportunities though. He had 1,500 all-purpose yards and 7 total touchdowns on what was a difficult season for Sanford considering their injury concerns. For the tight end position, Carl Williams, who won best tight end, will get the first team All-American nods there. And checking out the offensive line as well, Chad Rogers is here. He had 99 pancakes and only allowing 4 sacks as well. How was he not on any awards list for the finals? I have no idea, but Rick Nixon is in here as the Remington Award winner. He finishes, again, not allowing any sacks. And rounding out your offensive line, you got Mike Hunter, the senior right guard from Texas Southern, who did not allow a single sack. Donnie Porter, another senior but playing at Sacramento State. He had 37 pancakes and 4 sacks allowed. And of course, we have yet another offensive lineman from Texas Southern rounding out the offensive side of the football. John Franz, he's that sophomore I was talking about earlier. Moving over to the defensive side of the football, we got Marshawn Palmer, who ended up winning multiple awards. He won the Bednarik and the Lombardi Award trophies. The junior defensive lineman really showing out, as is both Alex Washington and Nathan Hunt. These two Aztec defensive linemen both ended up finishing as runners-up for the Lombardi Trophy. As we move to other parts of the first team All-American list, though, we have Brian Allen, the junior defensive tackle from Akron. Great season, even though he's a little bit underrated. He had 9 sacks and also forced a few fumbles too. Someone else who shouldn't be slept on at all is Mike Young, the sophomore linebacker from UL Monroe, from a conference that does not have an auto bid. Mike Young ended up with over 100 tackles. He also had 3 sacks, 5 interceptions, and a couple of forced fumbles, really doing his best to make a name for himself. Moving to other aspects of the outside linebacking core is Andre Murphy, who was on some awards lists. He's a senior from Sam Houston State. And Ryan Gilmore is here too, also a senior but playing at Utah State. He had 7 sacks, multiple interceptions, and a few forced fumbles too. For your defensive backfield, as we wrap up this first team All-American list though, is Nate Freeman. He's a sophomore corner from Chattanooga. Jim Forpay Award winner Sylvester Given. Heath Johnson is also here though. He's a junior from Nicholls State, part of a very good defense that did propel the Colonels to their first FCS playoff appearance. Going over to the safeties though, Mark Motley, he was a finalist for the Jim Forpay Award. He's a senior from Western Kentucky. And Kyle McCloud is here as well, as he represents the Sam Houston State Bearcats. Second All-American named already for Sam Houston State. He had an interception and a few forced fumbles too. Plus, he's just a junior as well. And of course, we have Paolo Pialo, a freshman from Texas State. Your custom, he's a first-team All-American. And the best punter as well in Corey Week. He's a junior, also from Texas State. So, Bobcats had a great special teams unit over the course of the season. So we now go over to the second team All-American group, and starting at the quarterback position, we have the senior from Eastern Michigan and Brent Tetzel, who was a finalist for the best quarterback award. But then we get some interesting names for the running back position. Louis Rose is not in this group. We got a couple of different names, but 2 guys that had good seasons as well. The senior running back from Sam Houston State, he finished the year with 1,600 yards of total offense, plus 19 touchdowns as well. So maybe a little bit of a surprise here, not seeing Louis Rose, but the guys that made it onto this list certainly earned that opportunity, as did Jonathan Birch, who had over 1,400 yards on the ground, plus 21 touchdowns to his name. He's a senior running back from Arkansas State. As for the receiving core, Andrew Hamilton is here. The junior wide receiver from Youngstown State, was a wide receiver finalist. We also got ourselves a Brown guy here. Brown able to make a name for himself as one of the best powers in the Ivy League. The senior wide receiver had a great season to his name. While he did not have any rushing touchdowns, he did end up finishing the year with 1,300 receiving yards and 15 touchdowns as well. Plus, he's got that Ivy League education if pro football does not work out for him. As for Solomon West, he was a finalist for the best returnman in college football. Finished in 3rd place, I believe. He had 18 all-purpose yards and 11 touchdowns. Like I said, he is a junior. Travis Taylor, he's a senior tight end from Sacramento State. He was also a finalist for the best tight end. He was actually second in that regard. Then we go to that offensive line that has David Alvarez, a finalist for the Remington Award. He represents the Rice Owls. Andrew Johnson, a sophomore guard from Georgia Southern. He finished the year not allowing a single sack. It was a year of transition for the Eagles. As for the rest of the offensive line, we have Brandon Mitchell, the junior guard from Texas State. He had 40 pancakes versus allowing just a few sacks on the season. And Adrian Barron, who won that Best Offensive Lineman award, but just finds himself as a second-team All-American. And Ben Subar rounds out your group for the offense. He was a senior from North Dakota State with 113 pancakes and 7 sacks allowed. But now we move ourselves over to the defensive side of the football. And not very notable names necessarily, but very talented players though. Corey McClellan starts off the group as he is a junior from Tennessee Martin. McClellan ended the year with 11 sacks, as well as getting an interception and a couple of forced fumbles to his name, so certainly much deserved. Aaron Sanchez is also in here as well, just a sophomore for the Golden Flashes over at Kent State. And while Kent State is not what they used to be in this series, he did finish with 8 sacks and 6 forced fumbles too. He knew how to find that football. Also in here is a guy with no surprises, Joseph Lysiak, the junior defensive tackle from Southeast Missouri State. And the same could also be said for Matthew Green. He's a senior defensive lineman from Eastern Carolina who finished the year with very close to getting double-digit sacks. As for the linebacker group, its second team is going to be highlighted by Dan Webb, as a senior from Norfolk State, won the Best Linebacker Award, but again, not on the second team All-American list, a little bit of a surprise. Jerome Jackson, no, a little bit of an unknown commodity. He's a junior from Alabama A&M. He finished the year with 90 tackles, 7 sacks, and got multiple interceptions and basically other turnovers too. And of course, your final linebacker on the second team All-American list is Jacob Brightman. Brightman finished the year with 6 interceptions, 5 forced fumbles, and a couple of defensive touchdowns too. Of course, we go to our corners now on this second team All-American list. That includes Brandon Martin, the senior corner from Rice, finished with 7 interceptions, certainly proving himself as a major ball hawk to watch out for, as was Keith Washington, who was a finalist for the Jim Forpay Award group. He had a great junior season for the Eastern Kentucky Colonels. And of course, rounding out your skill position guys for the second team All-American group is Eric Williams, the junior from Texas State, who finished with 6 interceptions and a forced fumble. And rounding out your group is the junior from Stephen F. Austin, Pat Frazier. Frazier finished with 4 sacks and multiple interceptions too. Also in this second team group is Ricky Williams, who won the Grozo Award and is just a sophomore at Sacramento State. And Preston Hall, who won the Guy Award as the best punter in college football. He was also a second team All-American. And finally, notable guys I wanted to bring up here in this All-American freshman group, particularly for your custom guys. Darius Draven from William & Mary is here in his rookie season, finished with 690 yards and 5 touchdowns as well. Andrew Bird, who was a freshman redshirt, he got a waiver for hardship. He finished with 21 pancakes and 3 sacks allowed on the year. Mohamed Veers from the Citadel had a great year as well. While he wasn't a big tackler, he did finish with 5 interceptions. But the person that I was surprised to not see on a first or second team list is Pistol McNeil. Pistol McNeil finished the year with not only double-digit interceptions, which I do believe leads the entire FCS. This was also somebody that had multiple defensive touchdowns as well. So I feel like Pistol McNeil definitely got snubbed in that regard. And of course, Paolo Pilo from Texas State is on here as well. He's a first-team All-American, and he didn't win the Groza, but he was very close to winning that award. But now we go ahead and get ourselves into really the most difficult part about any offseason. It's that you gotta go ahead and say goodbye to some players. And boy, were there some really good players that ended up graduating. I will go for the most notable ones, as well as guys who are leaving early for the pro draft. At least those notable guys. Joe Rice, Ryan Bush, and Matt Ryan. All 99 overall guys. They are all graduating. I'm sure we will hear their name called in the NFL draft. These guys are extremely talented football players, but I don't know how many FCS guys are going to end up being drafted this year. Typically, we do see 20 to 25 in real life, but a lot of talent here. John Clark, for example, he's a 98 overall, did not allow a single sack over the course of this season. We also have Frederick McNair, who is graduating. He's a 98 overall, one of your guys' customs, by the way, and Frederick McNair is considered a QB1, at least at the FCS ranks. From an NFL prospect standpoint, is considered a dual threat quarterback with his ability to pass and throw the football. As for James McClellan, we'll see the junior redshirt declare a year early. He was a first team all-conference guy this season, and he had 53 pancakes without allowing a single sack this past season. Also in here as well is Chris Black. He is just a junior that had 61 pancakes versus a few sacks allowed. But as a junior, he is also going to declare for the NFL draft. He is going to be a first-team all-conference nomination. Also declaring a year early is Shannon Crowell. He's a junior from Montana. The strong safety had a solid season with a few interceptions and a few forced fumbles as well. Very much an impact player for this Montana defense, so he'll test the NFL waters as well. Also looking to test the NFL waters early is Paul Miller, the junior from Southeast Missouri State. The junior linebacker ended up really being a Swiss Army knife, did a little bit of everything. He was a second-team all-conference nomination, and that versatility could help him should he hear his name called in the NFL draft. But now, then, we are starting to get to the point in this series where a lot of the first and original custom guys that you ended up submitting back in the year one offseason, we're starting to see some of those guys graduate. So for players that are leaving, I did want to mostly focus in on the custom guys as we progress through the remainder of what we got left in this series. But don't worry, there's plenty of seasons left in my opinion. Starting with Florida A&M, one of the user coach teams, coached by Coach Credible. Quay Davis, the senior wide receiver from Florida A&M, he is going to graduate after putting together 2,000 all-purpose yards and 10 touchdowns. The same could also be said for guys that maybe did not graduate or not start, but did contribute. Double K Williams is one of them. He had 13 tackles on the season. And a couple of other guys that are leaving is Willie Reed Jr., who did have to step up in his senior year. He ended up with 2 rushing touchdowns on the season. And career backup Togger Aladdin is also going to graduate. He had 6 tackles, 2 of which were TFLs. For James Madison, there's quite a few guys that are leaving early or trying to test the NFL waters, Emmanuel Lee and Stephen Terry being one of them, but some other folks that are going to graduate, one of them being Jonathan Henderson, who finally get a chance to be in a big-time role his senior year and made the most of it. Henderson will have a 1,000 yards season with 11 touchdowns to go with that, and that was his best college season than he did end up having. But now we go into the non-user teams, and we start with, in alphabetical order, we will start with Alabama State. Alabama State do having a couple of guys graduating. T.Y. Huntley, who finished his senior campaign with 2,800 yards and 25 touchdowns. A solid quarterback that just could not get the Hornets over the hump, as he did not get an FCS playoff appearance. But Trey Williams is also in here as well, a very good wide receiver. He ends up with 1,200 yards and 12 touchdowns in his senior campaign. Over at Alcorn State, we do find out that Rod Robertson, who was a first-team all-conference nominee, he is going to leave a year early to go and train for the NFL draft. Rod Robertson, with a pretty good junior season, I should say, had 40 total touchdowns and threw for over 3,500 yards in the process. Almost had them in the playoffs, but could not beat Texas Southern in that conference championship game. Also graduating from the custom ranks is Jacob Brightman, the senior linebacker from Arkansas Pine Bluff. He had a very good season, been documented multiple times already in this episode, but he is going to move on, possibly to life after football, depending on how things go with that NFL dream. For Brown, they will say goodbye to senior custom Josh McCoy, and Josh McCoy, arguably one of the best backup quarterbacks that you can ask for. Josh McCoy did not play very much, but when he did, he played extremely well, ended up going 6 for 6, 129 yards and a couple of touchdowns in his senior campaign. He just was outshined though by Marcus Patrick, who is also graduating, but is a first-team all-conference nomination. However, for Delaware, they will also say goodbye to senior wide receiver Elijah Moore. Elijah Moore ended up with over 700 yards receiving. Didn't find the end zone very much, but was an important part for a team that made a Cinderella run. They made it all the way to the semifinals of the FCS playoffs. And as a 21 seed, there is no shame in that. However, Queen Mary is frustrated by the playing time situation here at Delaware, so he is going to transfer out to William and Mary. He'll have to sit out for a season because he did not get a successful waiver to have that year of eligibility restored, but he will try and compete for more playing time somewhere else. As for the other Delaware team, we got the Delaware State Hornets, who say goodbye to Alex Zing. Alex Zing was a solid player in the back end of the Hornets secondary. He ended up with 3 TFLs and an interception in his senior campaign. As for Eastern Washington, we'll say goodbye to the quarterback Carl J. Fousen, a little bit of a gunslinger and had a decent senior season, 2,400 yards passing, and ended up with 23 total touchdowns, although he could not get the Eastern Washington Eagles back to the FCS playoffs in his senior campaign. However, Eastern Illinois saying goodbye to a couple of different guys, Ralph Ranks being one of them. He's a senior wide receiver, ends up with nearly 1,000 yards and 11 touchdowns too. Very good football player. But someone that is leaving early for the NFL, Russell Matthews. Russell Matthews ends up being 6 foot, 198 pounds, and the dude can flat out play. He had a sack this year, but also had 4 interceptions, a forced fumble, and not to mention multiple defensive touchdowns to go with that too. However, King William, as he is a freshman redshirt, he is going to go ahead and place himself into the transfer portal, and he will also be going over to William and Mary as well. He will be joining Queen Mary in the William and Mary tribe. So how about that? Just a match made in heaven. William and Mary may be a team to watch out for here in season number 7. As for Elon, they will be saying goodbye to somebody a year early, as David Baxter will declare for the NFL draft. David Baxter ends up going for over 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns, and that was good enough to be a second-team all-conference nominee. We'll see if he can make his way to the NFL as well. Someone who I don't expect to make it to the NFL, though, is Jonathan Cooks. Haven't really seen much of him, as Harvard just has not been a very good team in this series, at least to the point where they're worth showing them in gameplay, except maybe the occasional non-conference game. Cooks did end up with almost 100 yards receiving off of a few catches, though, as he was a utility player for the Crimson offense. Over at Howard, though, we have multiple custom guys graduating as we start with their starting quarterback, Carlson Saturday. Saturday was the full-time starter for the Howard Bison in his time here. In his senior campaign, he did have 2,500 yards passing as well as 27 touchdowns. But his backup is also going to be graduating as well. This is Wilson O'Donnell. He ends up being 13 for 22, 235 yards, and a couple of touchdowns. These two players did work with each other. However, Howard never played in the playoffs. Another couple of guys that also did not get to taste FCS playoff action is these two customs from Indiana State. The Sycamores say goodbye to 2 notable customs in Redmond Porter, where in his senior year, he only managed to catch a couple of touchdowns, but the Sycamore offense certainly was not the best. Still managed 622 yards his senior year. But Brandon Hauser made some great plays for him, though. While he only had 1 sack, he was also a ball hawk in the secondary with multiple interceptions. Up next, we got Jacksonville State saying goodbye to a custom player, and this one is DeMarcus McNeil. The senior impact player ends his career on a high note as he ends his senior season with 5 sacks, multiple interceptions and forced fumbles, as well as that defensive touchdown that you always love to see your guys making. At Maine, we also say goodbye to a couple of your custom guys. Flash Williams being the main one, though, as he had a good senior season. Even though Maine was not good enough for the playoffs, he had a good completion percentage that gave him 2,800 yards passing, as well as 21 touchdowns through the air. Another guy that they say goodbye to, and somebody that did not get much playing time towards the end of his college career, is Will Smith III. Will Smith III ended up with 9 tackles, 2 TFLs, and 1 singular sack. Speaking of guys that did not play very much, though, we have Kenny White, a senior from McNeese State, graduating. He ends his college career with being mainly a backup quarterback, but he was good in his opportunity. So 21 for 26 this season with 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. Also graduating from FCS college football is these 3 guys from Mississippi Valley State. We say goodbye to Kyle Benson, who was a true impact player with 7 sacks, an interception, and a forced fumble. Andrew Berry, who had 700 yards and 6 touchdowns in his senior campaign. And a guy that does not get a lot of love because he does play on that offensive line is Jonathan Fousen. Jonathan Fousen ended his senior year with 12 pancakes while just allowing 4 sacks on the season. At Montana, we have Don Pedro Alexander, another Season 1 custom saying goodbye. Was not as utilized later on in his college career, but still a solid player. He ended up with 250 yards receiving and a couple of touchdown grabs too in his last year of college football. Murray State will also say goodbye to Seth Randolph, one of the best players on their team this past season. While the stats did not necessarily show that, because he only has an interception and a forced fumble. Injuries really hampered his senior season, unfortunately. As for Dante Randolph, the North Carolina A&T State product, he's a senior wide receiver for the Aggies. He nearly ends up with 600 yards and also 7 touchdowns. Smoke James, another custom, really loves to go to this kid. However, Floyd Davis of the New Hampshire Wildcats, he will put his name in the transfer portal. This was somebody that actually contributed to his freshman year. 17 carries, 52 yards, and a couple of touchdown runs as well. However, he wants an opportunity to be that full-time starter, and he will look for that over at Hofstra, where he's going in the transfer portal. Frederick McNair, of course, we talked about him already as someone that could be QB1 from the FCS ranks as he prepares for the NFL draft now. But a couple of other guys leaving too. Deuce Randolph, who will be getting his college degree. He had 1,000 total yards and 8 touchdowns on the season as well. But a little bit of a surprise here, though. Speedy Woods is going to move on and try to go to the NFL. I was a little surprised by that, given his overall, but he did have nearly 1,000 yards in what was not necessarily a pass-friendly offense. So that's something to maybe watch out for. For customs that do end up declaring early but do not make it to the NFL, though, they will be moved over to the FBS ranks. So Speedy Woods still does have that 1 year of eligibility. Norfolk State, meanwhile, will say goodbye to a quarterback that has started for them for quite some time, is P.J. McNair. McNair was a decent quarterback at the FCS level, as in his senior season, he threw for 2,000 yards, as well as 24 touchdown passes. At North Dakota State, meanwhile, we got multiple customs that are actually leaving. Chris Black, obviously being one of them, as he is declaring for the NFL draft and could be one of the best draft prospects in the FCS level this upcoming NFL draft. However, that being said, we do have another couple of guys that are leaving. Ron Montez, the first custom ever to score a touchdown in gameplay. That was against Mid-Tennessee State back in year number 2. He finds himself on here. And then we also see another guy actually trying to leave early. John Weeks, the junior wide receiver from North Dakota State, had 1,300 all-purpose yards, as well as 6 total touchdown grabs too. Moving over to Northeastern, though, we got Robert Gordon, who is going to graduate. He did not play much his senior year because of injury, as he only ends up with 7 pancakes, while allowing a few sacks in his final college football season. At Northwestern State, though, we see a couple of guys graduating in Aiden Rose, who had 400 yards receiving and 5 touchdowns. Matthew Gravy will also be graduating from the Northwestern State Demons. He had a solid senior season, garnering 7 sacks, as well as multiple forced fumbles. Over at Omaha, we do have Blake Snow graduating, and he was somebody that stepped right away into that starting quarterback role, even though he may not have been fully prepared for that. He did, however, have a good senior season with 29 total touchdowns and 2,800 yards passing. At Princeton, we will see another quarterback graduate, though, DeMarco Wilson. At 6'4", 199 pounds, he was one of the best quarterbacks in the Ivy League. Could not lead them to the FCS playoffs, however, although he does have some hopes to make it to the NFL. Sacramento State will, however, say goodbye to Jacob Hill a year early because of how great his junior season one was. I personally don't blame him. He had 1,400 yards receiving and 15 touchdowns to go with that dude. He was a certified dog in this junior campaign. So him going to the NFL, or at least trying to make that happen, I don't blame him. Another wide receiver that certainly had to take a different route than Jacob Hill, though, was Craig Gregg. He was somebody that really had to earn playing time on this deep Sam Houston State squad. And while he's not an NFL caliber player in my opinion, he was a solid contributor, able to get 26 catches for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. Carson Ragsdale will also try to get to the NFL as he goes into his senior year. He ends up with over 3,000 passing yards and 33 touchdowns. Had a very illustrious career from an individual standpoint, but not a lot of team success though. We'll see if that holds him back when trying to get into the NFL. Rain Johnson of Southern, though, doesn't have to worry about the NFL, though, because he was somebody that wasn't really a starter at any point. Rain Johnson was a decent contributor, though, for the Southern Jaguars in his senior season. He ended his year with not a single touchdown, but did have 150 total yards off of 25 touches. At Tennessee State, meanwhile, they'll say goodbye to a couple of players, Shamrock being one of them, who was also mainly a backup here for the Tennessee State Tigers. He had 172 yards rushing and 3 total touchdowns as well. Let's see, also chipped in with 8 catches at 127 yards. Marcellus Wallace, though, was somebody that was never a full starter, but he was like that number 3 nickel corner, somebody that did make key plays, someone who I really think about, I believe it was year 1 or year 2, had a key interception that helped get him into the playoffs or make them move a little bit deeper, right? So Marcellus Wallace did have a nice college career. Speaking of players that had very good college career, though, is Mitchell McJones. He was a certified baller for the Texas State Bobcats. He had 2,300 yards passing, as well as 200 yards on the ground, a solidified dual threat quarterback to help lead the Texas State Bobcats to their first FCS appearance, and they will be missed. Speaking of players that will be deeply missed is J.J. Mathis. J.J. Mathis was part of a very solid defense here for the Kangaroos. Their offense always seemed to hold them back, but in his senior year, he had a good year overall, coming in with 4 sacks, an interception, and forcing a few other turnovers too. At Western Kentucky, we will say goodbye to the senior custom Zachary Davis, though, who at 6'7" and 305 pounds, has a good shot to make it to the NFL. He did have 29 pancakes and 4 sacks allowed, so he certainly has the size and the production. And rounding out the custom guys that are going to be leaving the FCS main portion of this series, Charles Falzon. He is a senior linebacker who had 6 sacks and 2 interceptions on the season. But somebody who is leaving a year early is Osiah Jackson Jr. He was actually redshirted back in year number 1, but in his junior redshirt season, he had 3,500 yards passing, and he feels that's good enough to get serious NFL consideration. We do list him and many other FCS players who may be leaving for the NFL, or at least trying for that opportunity. The best of luck. Now, one last thing that I did want to talk about before I move on to the next part of this FCS dynasty, and specifically who did actually make it to the NFL. There is a couple of other notable transfers that are not custom guys. Russell James, a sophomore from Eastern Illinois, he will be transferring to the Jackson State football team for his junior season. Robert Blankenship, a sophomore from Montana State, the free safety, actually staying within the conference. He is now going to go to North Dakota. He forced multiple forced fumbles this season. George Ford of Eastern Michigan is a tight end that is going to go to Yale. And Brian Bonner, who is a running back at Delaware, he saw a little bit more playing time than King William. He is going to transfer to Harvard. So very good pickups for those programs as they're trying to build a little bit through the transfer portal as well. But one thing that we certainly have noticed is that ever since we started this series, the level of quality football has really increased. And because that level of football has increased within the series, we have seen a record number of guys get drafted into the FCS level. We had, matter of fact, 23 players go to the NFL directly from the FCS ranks. So an incredible accomplishment for sure. And how about this for a rarity? We're going to start with Frederick McNair. He was actually not only a first-round pick, but he was actually the #1 overall selection in the NFL draft. He is going to the Chicago Bears. And while Justin Fields is still on this roster at this point in this Dynasty universe, that being said, Frederick McNair does have that hidden dev trait, and he is certainly going to make a lot of noise. Speaking of somebody that will be planning on making a lot of noise himself, we got Kyle Parker from Alabama State. He comes in at 6'7", 324 pounds, and he was actually the 4th overall selection taken by the Minnesota Vikings. But with the number 7 pick in the NFL draft, we see another FCS guy taken, Mario Gray. He's at 6'5", 255 pounds, and representing for Southeast Missouri State. He did hurt himself in training camp though with that little hip pointer issue, but that being said, he's someone that could be a day 1 contributor for the Jacksonville Jaguars. With the number 13 pick in the NFL draft, Phillip Sims was selected by the Atlanta Falcons. He is going to be someone that could be a starter very soon, but is expected to contribute early in his career. Plus, he has that hidden dev trait as well, representing well for the Idaho State Bengals. But right after Phillip Sims, though, we had Brian O'Connor out of Northwestern State. He was selected by the Denver Broncos with the number 14 pick in the NFL draft. Brian O'Connor does only have that normal dev trait. However, he is a very good scheme fit for what they want to do, and he could have a very good NFL career as well. With the number 17 selection here in the NFL draft, the Houston Texans did select John Hill out of Tennessee State. And while the Tennessee State Tigers were not that great this season, he was a special piece for their defense. He was a leader, and that leadership definitely shines through, as he does have a pretty solid field general overall right off the rip, but he does mainly specialize in run stopper. He also carries that hidden dev trait as well. But someone who I am particularly excited about is Ryan Bush from South Carolina State. He was the number 19 selection in the NFL draft. He is actually going to be starting right away for the Cincinnati Bengals, so it shouldn't take too long before we find out what his dev trait truly is. A couple picks later, though, we have another outside linebacker drafted from the FCS ranks. It's Jerome Beach. Jerome Beach is the number 21 overall selection by the Carolina Panthers. The second Southeast Missouri State guy drafted out of that defense already. He's someone that could get some playing time eventually. He does have a normal dev trait as well. But right after Jerome Beach is Anthony Valentine, the number 22 overall selection taken by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Anthony Valentine is from Arkansas Pine Bluff, and while his team did not make the FCS playoffs, he's going to represent well for the Golden Lions, as he should start right away for this Tampa Bay defense. But right after both Anthony Valentine and Jerome Beach was taken, we also had James McClellan drafted here in the first round. He was selected with the 23rd overall pick and was selected by, back then they were known as the Washington football team in Madden 22. I started this series before Madden 23 came out, but that's besides the point. That being said, James McClellan is a normal dev trained guy, but someone that's very capable of getting some playing time. At number 25, though, the Detroit Lions selected Brian White out of Southern University. Brian White is mainly known as a vertical threat. He will be a normal dev trait guy. but he is expected to be the tight end 2 this season for Detroit. At number 27, it was the New Orleans Saints that were on the board, and it was Nicholas Rogers out of Southeast Louisiana that was drafted. Nicholas Rogers will be a backup tackle, at least to start out in his rookie season, but he does have a hidden depth trait too. At number 28 was the New England Patriots, and with their first round selection, they grabbed Tavita Bean out of the University of New Hampshire, so he doesn't have to go too far from his college team for his NFL dreams to come into fruition. He's someone who also has a hidden depth trait, but will start as a backup linebacker. And with the final pick in the first round of the NFL draft, the Dallas Cowboys selected Tim Nobles out of Western Carolina. The Catamounts left guard has that hidden depth trait as well, and he'll start out as a notable backup for that offensive line. But we go back to the Chicago Bears for their second round selection. They selected one of your customs in Frederick McNair with the first overall pick. But with the first pick in the second round of the NFL draft, we'll see another custom drafted, Chris Black. He is going to be representing North Dakota State. Lot of Bison that could be drafted here in this offseason, and he could be in line to start right away if he can win the job in the preseason. But the Chicago Bears were actually not the only NFL team, I should say, to grab multiple FCS guys, as the Vikings also go back into the well with their fourth pick in the second round, and they grab Mike Hunter, the right guard out of Texas Southern, as the Tiger is going to be listed as a hidden depth guy, but will be listed as number 3 on the right guard depth chart. 2 picks later, though, we see the Miami Dolphins select Paul Miller out of Southeast Missouri State, someone that should be solidified with a roster spot, but he does carry just a normal dev trait. 4 picks later, though, we will see the San Francisco 49ers select Dustin Mitchell, and he is a mammoth of a man, sitting at 6'7", 260 pounds. Might need to put on a tad bit of weight at the NFL, but from Weber State, he's in a pretty good organization, and he'll be at least a backup guy right away. With the 18th pick in the second round of the NFL draft, the Green Bay Packers select Shannon Crowell, the strong safety out of Montana. He declared early, so he's just 21 years old. Could be someone that will be a future starter for his team, given he also has that hidden depth trait. Moving on to the third round, we have the 5th selection, which happened to be made by the LA Chargers, and Jordan Clark was selected here out of North Dakota State, someone who also happened to declare early after 3 years of eligibility. John Clark does carry that hidden depth trait as well, and could potentially be a very good selection for the LA Chargers. But Michael Alexander out of New Hampshire was drafted right after him, and the Miami Dolphins, with their 6th pick in the third round, they grab a guy that is actually going to be starting for them right away. So to get a starter in day 2, pretty good proposition. But 5 picks later, we see another AFC East team grab an FCS guy, and it's also from North Dakota State. John Paul Anderson was selected with the 11th pick in the third round of the NFL draft, also representing for North Dakota State. He is, however, a normal depth trait guy and is expected to be a backup, at least in his rookie season. And the last FCS player that did happen to be taken was Jeremy Franklin. He's a right tackle from Northern Arizona, and while he was selected in the 4th round of the NFL draft by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, this was somebody that could outlive that day 3 status, as he does have that hidden depth trait, although he is not expected to start right away. But we now get to one of my favorite parts in all of the offseason here in the FCS Dynasty. We are going to see what happened in that recruiting, who ended up going there, who's going to be the future of this lower end of Division I college football. So that being said, we're going to look at the top individuals that signed, because we're going to do that first because it is all about the student athletes making those college dreams become a reality. And then we're also going to take a look at the team rankings as well. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and start with the individual rankings, and it starts with that #1 player in all of high school football, James Bennisman from Texarkana, Texas. A little bit undersized, 5'11", 225, but Northwestern State, they got themselves a dog. Somebody who's a 4'6'9" guy, B+ field awareness, 35-inch vertical. This dude can play the game of football, and Northwestern State, they're going to be very excited to bring this guy in. Now, as for the #1 athlete in college football, there was actually one 5-star athlete out there, and that was Kevin Smith. Kevin Smith is from Evergreen, Washington, but he will not remain on the West Coast in order to play his college football, because he will actually be playing for the Texas State Bobcats, who just made their first FCS playoff appearance. Kevin Smith looks like somebody that could be translating well as a wide receiver or defensive back, possibly. He's got A+ field awareness, B+ hands, and he runs a sub 4.4 as well to go with all of that. For the quarterbacks, though, we have a winner from the Elite 11 camp, and that's David Carlson. David Carlson is from West Springfield, Virginia, and sitting at 6'4", 205 pounds. He will remain in the state of Virginia as he will play his college football with the James Madison Duke. So a great future player for this program, who continues to build really the great quarterbacks that have gone through that university. Stephen Terry, definitely a recent one who left early to try his luck at the NFL. But David Carlson is somebody who runs a 4.65. He can do everything. One thing that he does need to work on, though, is his pass accuracy. As for the top running back in college football, we have Vernon Williams from Belden, Missouri, sitting at 6 foot and 200 pounds. Vernon Williams will sign with the Chattanooga Mocs, who are also coming off of an FCS playoff appearance, although they were bounced in the first round by San Diego State. Vernon Williams is a guy who can also do a little bit of everything. He's a 4.3 guy, low 4.3, might I add, has the ability to catch out in the backfield, and he can run you over too if he needs to, with a nearly 700-pound squat. Now, fullback may be a dying breed, but don't tell that to these guys. Mike Chambers is the #1 fullback in high school football, and from Martinsville, Indiana, he is going to sign with South Carolina State, as the Bulldogs are looking to get back into the playoffs after narrowly missing out last season. Mike Chambers, with that #1 ranking, stands at 5'10", 239 pounds, but is more known for being able to catch the football. He's got very good hands for somebody who, for a fullback position, that doesn't necessarily have that. Speaking of pass catchers, though, we gotta go to the wide receivers. And the #1 wide receiver in high school football is Alfred McClellan. McClellan is from Edgewood, Kentucky, and very good size, 6'5", 215 pounds, ready for that college football right away. He's going to join the defending national champions, though, out in Western Carolina. The Catamounts getting a very strong football player here. Just a ridiculous 40 time. 4.1 is his 40. He's got Deion Sanders speed. He catches everything his way, and he's got some very good awareness as well. Could be a legend at Western Carolina for years to come. As for the other skill position guys that we got going on, Billy Johnson from New Seymour Beach, Florida. He's going to go join Georgia Southern, as Georgia Southern looks to recapture their glory, a team that did not make the playoffs last year in spite of winning the national championship back in year #4. Billy Johnson is a 4-star guy who has the ability to both catch as well as block, as he's considered a balanced archetype here in NCAA 06. But the most important thing of any offense is to control things at the line of scrimmage. And for these guys, they're going to certainly help establish that, as we have Dion Richardson, who's the #1 high school player at the tackle position, the #1 overall player being a JUCO guy going to Akron. Deion Richardson is from Corpus Christi, Texas, home to TCU Horned Frogs. And Deion Richardson, very good pickup for Southeast Missouri State. They get somebody who almost runs a sub-5 for somebody that's 320 pounds. So that is something to really watch out for. Also has nearly a 700-pound squat and a 520-pound bench as well. Somebody to watch out for to move some bodies. We do have a similar situation in the offensive guards coming out of high school. Number one guy also being a JUCO going to North Texas. Keeping it in the state of Texas, though, is Travis Wilson. He's from West Odessa. Well, he's not the biggest guy at 264 pounds. Travis Wilson, man, he can also move some people, too. Over 700 pounds with that squat, and if he can put on some weight in college with that, Division I weight training regimen, watch out. This could be an NFL player down the line, and Grambling State is surely going to love him. And finally, for the centers, there's two guys that I wanted to talk about. Dan Deloach from Whitehall, Ohio is the best JUCO guy, and he's going to go to the Howard Bison. But the guy that I really wanted to highlight, all the way from Toronto, Canada, the Canadian football system could not keep him in Canada. He's going to cross the border and play for the Eastern Washington Eagles this fall, as that will be a big pickup for the Eagles program. Dude runs a sub-5 and is 280 pounds. This dude can move, and Eastern Washington is going to love him at the center position. Of course, at defensive end, we obviously have James Benjamin, who is the number one player, not only at his position, obviously, but he is the number one overall player in this recruiting class among all positions. So, again, great pickup by Northwestern State, obviously. But for the defensive tackle spot, though, for those interior hog mollies, Brian Hawkins gets that number one designation. From Ashtabula, Ohio, Southeast Missouri State continues to add on to what is a really good defense. This is a defense that has one of the best defenses in the FCS. They sent a few defenders to the NFL actually just recently, and Brian Hawkins is that dude. 4'8", got A+ field awareness, so nothing's going to bamboozle him that easily. He's also got a 500 bench and a 640 squat. He can do just about everything for you, and I'm sure the Red Hawks are going to love him too. Moving over to the linebackers, though, we got Dustin Jones from Bryan Mawr Skylay, Washington. Able to get him out of Eastern Washington's proudness, and Texas Southern gets a very quality football player. 6'2", 238 pounds, got that size that you're really looking for. Not to mention he runs a 4.4 in the 40 as well. The only weakness that he may have is that he may not catch a lot of interceptions. He does only have C- hands, but in terms of stopping the run, oh boy, Dustin Jones is going to be a problem. As for the interior linebackers, specifically that middle linebacker position, the number one linebacker is Roger Rush from Riverside, California. Montana State trying to get over the hump as they were literally the last team out in terms of FCS playoff consideration. The automatic qualifier bid field, there was a couple of bids stolen, so that was what kept Montana State out, unfortunately. But they're trying to get over the hump, and I think Roger Rush could very well be that guy. 4.3 in the 40, so he's extremely quick, can cover a lot of ground, and he's extremely aware as well. Someone who can be a good leader for your defense. But in today's college football, if you do not want to get blown out, you'll have to have the ability to defend the pass. And these corners are certainly up for that challenge. While there was no blue chip guys at the cornerback position, Matthew Lewis is the number one corner. He's from Erie, Pennsylvania. Sitting at 6 foot, 178 pounds, he is going to sign with the Texas Southern Tigers. For free safety, it is the same case for them as well. He's from Sugarland Run, Virginia, and 6 foot, 201 pounds, leaving the state of Virginia in order to go play for the Western Carolina Catamounts, who just won their first national championship. But we do have a couple of blue chip guys, however, at the strong safety position, one of them being Thomas Bullocks. He's from Shawnee, Kansas, and he is a blue chip guy. Sitting at 6'4", 211 pounds, he will sign with the Northwestern State Demons. They're going to try to be on demon time. Someone who can cover a ton of space, 4'1", great field awareness, and can catch just about everything too. Plus, it doesn't hurt to have that 40-inch vertical too. Of course, the second best guy in the secondary vote is Ashley Smith. He's from Corpus Christi, Texas. He does stay in state and go to Sam Houston State as well. And finally, you gotta talk about those special teams guys a little bit, and we go over to the kicker's position specifically, and we start with Andrew Moses. Andrew Moses is the #1 kicker out of high school, considered a 4-star guy. Yeah, this is a game that actually did have 4- and 5-star kickers and punters. You do not see that in NCAA 14. I at least have not seen a 4- or 5-star kicker and punter. But if you have, let me know down in the comment section. But Andrew Moses is a very good kicker. He's going to sign with the Western Carolina Catamounts, and someone who's got really a boot of a leg and is extremely accurate as well. Reminds me of Destroying. And of course, you gotta control field position if your offense does not score points. And Dan Campella, also a 4-star guy. He's from Oak Grove, South Carolina, and he will actually stay in state in order to attend his next 4 or 5 years of college football to play with the South Carolina State Bulldogs. South Carolina State gets somebody who maybe isn't the most accurate. He only has B+ kick accuracy, but he does have A+ kick power, and he can certainly get it down there and flip the field if his accuracy is on point. So I took some time to go over the individual players to watch out for, and before I go ahead and jump into the team rankings, I do want to take this time to let you know how you guys can get a little bit more involved in this series. So how I have things set up is that I do have a template down in the pinned comment section, and how it's going to work is it's going to be kind of a renaming kind of thing. You can put your player name, your position, and then also give me your free schools that you prefer to go to. Your first choice, your second choice, and your third choice as well. I'm going to try to get you to those schools, but it's going to be also based on an overall system. So if you're a $5 channel member, for example, you're able to get a freshman that's in that 80 to 85 overall range. Day 2 channel members who support this channel in a more personal way is for folks that want a 75 to 79 overall player. Guys that are in my Discord, which are linked in the description as well, they'll get somebody who's in the 70 to 74 overall range. And then if you want a YouTube submission but you don't feel like doing all of those things, you can still get somebody who's in that 60 to 69 overall range, because the last thing that I want to do to anybody is give somebody a 50 or 40 something overall player that has absolutely no chance of seeing the field and probably gets cut for roster purposes, because we're now at that point in the series, right? So if you're interested in a custom prospect, feel free to fill that out in the comment section down below, and I will certainly get you guys in this series. And if you do want to support my channel membership program and support my channel in a more personal way, feel free to check that out. That's also linked down in the description. Obviously, I will never have a paywall behind my content because it is for the freedom of the people, of the masses. But, you know, it's a little something if you want to donate, because all of the revenue from the channel membership program goes directly to this YouTube channel, and it goes to providing a much more quality experience to you guys. But now that I've taken some time to go after some of the notable individual players, as well as take a quick moment to talk about customs in this series and how all that works, is we are now moving through into the team rankings here. Now, obviously, there's over 110 teams, so I'm not going to show all of them, but I'm going to run through the top 25, as well as some other notable FCS teams that don't have a top 25 class, but did make it to the FCS playoffs. So we got to start obviously with that #1 class, Southeast Missouri State. They signed the best class in America down at the lower end of Division I college football. And this is a team that was a Big Ten champion, but they were embarrassed by Delaware in the second round of the FCS playoffs. So they're going to go back into the lab, and they go ahead and grab themselves several guys that are going to help their football team out. Notably, they really beefed up in the trenches. They ended up signing 3 5-stars in this class, and all of them are in the trenches, including Deion Richardson on the offensive side, and a future duo in Brian Hawkins and Brody Gold. Now, as for the defending national champions, though, they will follow that up with a very strong recruiting class too. In Western Carolina, they want to continue to put a lot of points up on that scoreboard. All 3 of their 5-star guys happen to be offensive guys, and a pairing to watch out for in the future is 5-star quarterback Brian Bowie connecting with Alfred McClellan, who is the #1 wide receiver in this recruiting class. In addition, they do also sign a 5-star guard in Marcus Campbell. As for the Texas State Bobcats, they actually they went in to their first FCS playoff appearance, and they really capitalized on that. They end up signing the #3 class here in this offseason, so offseason champions right there. They're going to be loading up on talent. They bring in 5 5-star players. I thought they were going to have the #1 class, but they signed a little too many 2- and 1-star guys, but 3 guys to definitely watch out for here, 2 of which are from California, Taylor Marcellus and Joel Little. That's going to be a pairing to certainly watch out for. Not to mention Desley Mosley can really be deadly from the ground. He's from Corsicana, Texas. Speaking of those Texas teams, Texas Southern signs the #4 class, even though they were also embarrassed by Delaware, except this happened in the first round of the FCS playoffs. But they are conference champions nonetheless, and they already talked about Dustin Jones. He's the #1 outside linebacker, but they do sign a couple of running backs to try to replace Roderick Murray. Alan Bobo is one of them, and then Jacob Cannon is another one as well. So they're looking to continue their run-heavy approach here in this FCS dynasty. At #5, we do have the national runners-up in Sacramento State. In Sacramento State, they signed the #5 class, even though they only did manage to sign 1 5-star. That was Chris Hartman, the guard from Jasper, Indiana. However, there's a lot of quality in this recruiting class, though. 12 4-stars, 2 notable ones, including Josh Brown and Jared Palmer, as they look to support Jack Quinn, who will likely be the new starting quarterback for the Sacramento State Hornets. As for Northwestern State, we see them catapult to #6 in the final recruiting rankings. This is a team that did not make the FCS playoffs last year, but James Benjamin, he is the #1 player in this class. He's really going to help their cause, and they get a couple of other defensive guys as well. Thomas Bullocks being one from Shawnee, Kansas. He's a 5-star, as well as another defensive tackle by the name of Aaron Pugh, who's a high-end 4-star from Saginaw, Texas. At #7, we have the South Carolina State Bulldogs, who are here in spite of not having a 5-star. And they were also a team that was very close to making the FCS playoffs, but that did not happen for them, though. This is a program that has 11 4-stars, though. So again, like Sacramento State got going on, a very quality class, even though it didn't bring in really any elite players per se. 3 guys to watch out for, though, is Ed Buckles at wide receiver. He's from Port Charlotte, Florida. And then we also have James Green, a center from Fort Payne, Alabama. And rounding out this group is Ricky Hawley, who's going to own things in the defensive side of the trenches from Vero Beach, Florida. For #8, we have the James Madison Dukes, who participated up to the second round of the FCS playoffs. They did sign the #1 quarterback in David Carlson, but other than that, no other real elite talent. A lot of 4-stars in this class for the Dukes. They signed Marcus Paynes, who's also a quarterback from Ben Harbor, Michigan, as well as Adam Suggs, a wide receiver, also in the state of Virginia, by the name of North Springfield. Sam Houston State, on the other hand, they finished #9 in the final AP poll, and they will also have the #9 recruiting class here. The Cardiac Cats signed a 5-star by the name of Ashley Smith, and he'll have a partner in Quentin Hatchell, who look to get a lot of space covered as well, so watch out for that safety duo. And they also bring in an elite weapon by the name of Zach Robinson, who's a high-end 4-star from College Station, Texas, home of the Texas A&M Aggies. Now, this is a little bit of a surprise here as the Sanford Bulldogs. They had a very difficult season. They went essentially the entire year without their starting quarterback, and then Hendrik Solo had to start for most of the year. in spite of all of that, they almost made the FCS playoffs, and they also signed a top 10 class too. They mainly signed Ryan Grigsby, who's a 5-star from Woodbury, Minnesota. You don't usually see 5 stars from Minnesota, but whatever floats your boat. We also have a couple of other 4-star guys from the state of Florida, and Steve Hunter, who's an athlete, so it'll be interesting to see where he ends up translating to. And then Michael Thomas is a defensive end. He's from Gainesville, Florida. For number 11, we have the Chattanooga Mocs, and it seems like this could very well be a program that is on the rise. They finished in the final AP poll in the top 25 as they made their second FCS playoff appearance in this series. They also signed the number 11 recruiting class too. Vernon Williams is in here, as well as Timothy Lewis as 5-star guys. They're from that Midwest southern region of the country. But on the defensive side of the ball, they bring in Joe Dowdell, a 4-star from Carrollton, Georgia. He's going to be playing free safety for the Chattanooga Mocs. Following the Chattanooga Mocs, we got the North Dakota State Bison. The Bison making it all the way to the semifinals of the FCS playoffs before falling to Sacramento State. North Dakota State, while not signing any 5-star players, bring in plenty of 4-stars, most notably Justin Watkins at the middle linebacker position. He's from Norristown, Pennsylvania. They also bring in Eric Jones from California, and on the offensive side of the ball, they bring in James Kelly, who's a running back from Bellwood, Illinois. Now, for Nicholls State, the Colonels, they come in with the number 13 overall class. Got some talent to replace, particularly at the quarterback position, as Frederick McNair did go number 1 overall in the NFL draft. So we'll see what happens at the quarterback position, but whoever does play quarterback is going to have some new toys. Jamal Porter is a 5-star receiver from Bayou Vista, Louisiana. That's their best signing. They also bring in David Harris, who's a 4-star from Texas. And then on the defensive side of the ball, they bring in Richard Stuckey, who's a corner from Zaguline, Texas. And that nets Nicholls State, the number 13 recruiting class. At 14, we have the Georgia Southern Eagles, who finished number 19 in the final AP poll, even though they did not make the FCS playoffs. So, very interesting decision by the committee there on that. Maybe a little bit biased towards the Eagles, but they signed another good recruiting class. They signed in Kyle Lucas as their main stud muffin. He's a 5-star from Bridge City, Louisiana. And they also bring in a couple of 4-stars from Florida in order to bolster up that offense. Billy Johnson, who's going to play tight end for them, as well as Dave Daniels, who will help handle things in the interior of that offensive line. Following the Georgia Southern Eagles, we have the Tennessee Martin Skyhawks as they soar to the second round of the FCS playoffs. They have now made 2 consecutive FCS playoff appearances now. Their main signings were all on the offensive side of football as they bring in 2 5-star guards in Avery Foster and Darrell Braden as well. Not to mention David Young, who's a 4-star wide receiver from Seven Hills, Ohio. This leads the Skyhawks to have the number 15 recruiting class. At number 16, though, is the Murray State Racers, who are fresh off their first FCS playoff appearance. And the Racers, they finished with a number 16 class. However, there was no 5-stars in here. They do have some good quality, and they've used their maximum 25 scholarships, so that always helps in those recruiting rankings when it's all said and done, big picture. But the 3 4-stars to definitely watch out for in this class is Jason Stewart, who's an outside linebacker from Statesville, North Carolina. Then on the offensive side of the ball, look out for Kyle Robinson and Derek Trena, both playing as potential offensive weapons here for this Racers offense. Keeping it in the Big Ten, though, we have another top 20 class for the Big Ten as they're turning into one of the better conferences in FCS college football. The OVC is definitely going to be a challenge, but Eastern Kentucky going with a very unique approach here. They signed 6 4-star guys, but half of their 4-stars are all going to be in the backfield. Drew Irons, Roy Smith, Richie Pace, all play that running back position, and that's all of their top signings too. So, interesting with how that's going to work out. I wouldn't be surprised if at least one of those guys did end up entering the transfer portal at some point in their college careers. Definitely something to watch out for. At number 18, though, we have a little bit more variety in this recruiting class. The Montana Grizzlies, who end up making it to the second round of the FCS playoffs. They did get embarrassed by North Dakota State, though, but they did beef up that class too. 1 5-star in this class, that's Tyrone Whaley, the defensive tackle, also from California. So getting from California all the way up to Montana, always a big win. Speaking of Montana, guys, Deer Watch Montana and Peter Charles, he's the best player in the state of Montana. He stays in state. And they also bring in Jimmy Williams, too, from Daly City, California. He's a 4-star. Alcorn State, though, was able to make the most of its opportunities on the national stage, as even though they lost in that Big 12 championship game, that prevented Alcorn State from going to the playoffs ultimately. They still bring in a very quality class, all of it on the offensive side of football, which wasn't their weakness last year. So we'll see what they do to address the defensive side of football. But offensively, they're going to have some really good talent moving forward, as with Rod Robertson leaving early to go either to the NFL or to the FBS ranks. We'll see what happens to him in the next episode for the season preview. Steven Johnson is a 4-star quarterback from Denham Springs, Louisiana. He'll be trying to live up to his name. And there's 2 offensive linemen that are going to try to protect him, both from Mississippi. Chris Smith, the center, and Matt Walker, who's a guard, and also the sole Alcorn State signing. After Alcorn State, we have the Northern Arizona Lumberjacks, who once again make it to the FCS playoffs. They make their 2nd consecutive appearance, but just like last year, they did lose in the first round of the playoffs this year. This time, they do bring in the number 20 overall class, and this class all has guys from California. Brian Owens, a 4-star from Adena, California. We'll have a couple of guys to throw to in David Brown and Michael Wilcox, who both play that wide receiver position. For number 21, we have the New Hampshire Wildcats, who finished number 2 in the final AP poll. New Hampshire, a team that did lose in the quarterfinals to Sacramento State. New Hampshire is a team that did not bring any 5-stars this year, but a quality class nonetheless, as they bring in Thomas Pollock, who's a 4-star from Forest Hill, Maryland. He is a guard. Then they also bring in a couple of guys from the state of Pennsylvania, in Courtney Alexander, who plays that corner position, and Jake Simmons, who is at defensive end. We'll see if New Hampshire can keep themselves close to the top. Moving on to the number 22 recruiting class, a team that was also not ranked in the top 25 the end of the season, the Eastern Washington Eagles. They had a decent season, but not enough to remain with the highest ranks of FCS football and therefore make it back to the FCS playoffs after making it back in year 4. Eastern Washington signs 2 5-stars, including the number 1 center in Randall Maxwell. That's always really cool to see. They also keep John Parker and Larry McRae in state to help bolster that defensive side of football. John Parker in particularly is a 5-star guy. Eastern Illinois is up next, and they are number 23 in the final recruiting rankings. Eastern Illinois finished as the number 4 overall seed, but lost in the quarterfinals to the Cinderella in Delaware. Eastern Illinois still putting in a good effort on recruiting, though mostly affect the offensive side of football. Marcus Barrow and Lucas Gatewood are both very good players coming out of high school, but what I'm interested in is Vernon White, who's listed as an athlete. He's from Elyria, Ohio, so I'm really curious to see what happens to him moving forward. What position does he translate to at the college level? And of course, to round out your top 25, we do have the Akron Zips, who were the only undefeated team in the regular season. They finished with a number 24 overall class. And we have the Weber State Wildcats with that number 25 overall class. They bring their best talent from California, 5 4-stars, including 2 guys that play safety, and Chris Anderson and Courtney Ramsey. But that being said, there was a couple other programs that I did want to talk about because they did make the FCS playoffs, but in spite of that, they did not sign a top 25 recruiting class. Now, Delaware was pretty close. They finished with the 27th recruiting class. They finished in the number 16 overall in the AP poll. I felt that Delaware should have finished a little bit higher than that, since they made it all the way to the semifinals as a number 21 seed, and they almost they had Western Carolina on the ropes too. You know, it was very much possible to see Western Carolina not be a national champion. So Delaware, they still signed a good class. They managed to get 27th with just 16 signees, and Chris Cottrell is their main signing, as he's the only 5-star that the Blue Hens signed this offseason. But another team that I want to quickly talk about real quick is the Brown Bears. The Brown Bears have been a little bit more of a fixture in the FCS playoffs, as they have benefited from really being a dominant force in the Ivy League. They won their 4th title in 5 seasons, and because of that, Brown has made 4 FCS playoff appearances. And this time they actually signed a pretty solid recruiting class as well. They end up finishing number 53 overall, and they do also get a 4-star outside linebacker by the name of Daryl Irvin. So with that being said, we did have a little bit of an update on what's going on with NCAA sanctions, and not a lot of programs out there that are being sanctioned right now, but there has been some updates for Northern Colorado. They have continued to really struggle with being in trouble with the NCAA, and because of that, not only do they lose 10 scholarships for each of the next 2 seasons, so they only have 15 scholarships to give out instead of 25 scholarships, they will also not be eligible for the FCS playoffs in year number 6, as well as in year number 7 as well because of that. But guys, that is going to wrap things up here with the off-season recap. We now prepare ourselves for season number 6, and because of the fact that we are going to be here in year number 6, I am going to change up a little bit of the format going forward in this series, but I will explain a little bit more of that in the next episode. But with that being said, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this series so far, and you guys are ready for another year of FCS football coming up. For the next episode, we will have the preseason preview, which does entail going over that preseason top 25. We'll also go into the custom players that are going to be revealed in this series, more than just Bruno Baggio, who was on the cover of Athlon Sports, the preseason All-Americans, and a little bit of a preview of what's to come here in the first gameplay episode of year number 6 and how I want to move going forward. So that being said, I hope you guys enjoy the content. If you did, make sure you go ahead, smack that like button, hit that subscribe button as well if you do happen to be brand new to the channel. And also, if your guys are obviously interested in a custom guide, make sure you put that down in the template down below. But with that being said, this is John J Gaming on the mic signing off. Hoping you guys are all out there having a good one. Take care, everybody.